In some sanctuaries, we have extensive involvement with the tribes. We make it very clear that the treaty rights take precedent over any sort of federal regulation in the sanctuary. We do engage with the tribes on a government-to-government consultation basis. We also are engaged in working with the tribes on their priorities. Okay, so what is the model of a sanctuary? How do you describe that? And I think one of the best ways is to use this diagram here, which shows these 4 arrows pointing at conservation and preservation of resources. So our major components are resource protection, education and outreach, research and monitoring, and then the community engagement part is sort of a cross-cutting aspect of what we do. So I'm going to provide a couple examples of the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but I wanted to leave it to Carol to talk about these programs in Olympic Coast. So just a couple examples. In the Thunder Bay Sanctuary in Lake Huron, one of the first programs that we started in the year 2000 when it was designated was an underwater robotics competition. And we hosted, it was a regional competition where high school kids would come and they would build underwater robots, and there was a mission. It's a national competition ultimately, but each year there's a different mission where the ROV has to do certain things underwater. A year and a half ago, Alpena, Michigan, a town of 10,000 people, held the international competition for this, and it was just stunning. We had 13, 15 countries represented. But more than that, what it means for Alpena is that students now expect to be experts in this. So Thunder Bay is focused on shipwrecks, but this is focused on technology and getting the skills for our kids to advance in this world of technology. Another component is research, and I just wanted to show a few slides here about whether it's divers directly doing research on the shipwrecks, whether we're using ROVs to document, or an autonomous underwater vehicle to either find wrecks or do some other documentation. And what do we use this? I mean, we use it to better understand the resource that we're protecting. We use these images and the information in our education and outreach programs. The top image there shows the impact of zebra and quagga mussels. And I forget exactly the time difference here, but it wasn't all that different. And this is a very deep wreck. I think this one is at over 200 feet. Resource protection perspective, I look at this, we have programs and we have regulations. So one example of a program, again in Thunder Bay, is our mooring buoy program, where we currently have 35 mooring buoys at shipwreck sites that are put in. They're good, they're high quality mooring buoys, not milk jugs. NOAA puts them in the spring and takes them out in the fall. But most importantly, it protects the shipwreck because you don't have divers pulling anchors into a wreck, but it also makes it safer for the divers. And then the other aspect of our resource protection program, there are sanctuary regulations that are associated with every marine sanctuary. But what's so important here is to emphasize that these regulations are directly related to the resource that is being protected. So in the case of Thunder Bay, which is shipwrecks, it's about protecting shipwrecks. So one of the questions I get asked quite a bit is, what does it mean to be in a sanctuary in terms of access? What would I not be able to do that I can do now? I mean, it does depend on the sanctuary, but in the case of Thunder Bay, all activities, fishing, diving, boating, can be conducted unless they're prohibited, and my next slide is what's prohibited. And there are no restrictions on access. We're not telling people where to dive. We're not telling them how to dive. Same with fishing. There are no zones around the shipwrecks that are off limits. What we do care about is that the shipwrecks are not damaged and that artifacts aren't taken. So these are our 3 prohibitions in Thunder Bay, and I realize there's a lot of text here, but the first one is don't damage a wreck. The second one is don't alter the lake bottom if there's an adverse impact on a shipwreck or underwater cultural resource. And the third one is if there's a mooring buoy there, you have to use it. You can't use a grappling hook if there is a mooring buoy. And those are the 3 prohibitions in the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And just to, again, this is the point about access. Can we use the sanctuary? And here's our brochure here for Thunder Bay, emphasizing that we're encouraging access for diving, snorkeling, kayaking, and fishing. So next I'm going to segue to this new opportunity to nominate areas for national marine sanctuaries. It's been quite some time since NOAA's had the authority, the ability to consider new sanctuaries, since the mid-1990s to be exact. And we've changed our approach to how we're looking at how we're doing this. The old way of how we selected sanctuaries was we had a list called our site evaluation list, which was generated by scientists, a panel of experts that looked at areas around the country and decided that an area would be a good candidate for a marine sanctuary. So we had this list of, I can't remember how many sites, and periodically we would select an area from that site. But in the mid-1990s, we were in the midst of beginning to implement a series of new sanctuaries and wanted to put that on hold because we didn't want to deal with new sanctuaries or to designate further sanctuaries. So since 1995, we haven't had the ability to start a new sanctuary designation. Now we have 14 sites in our system, which really is a pretty small number. So we do have an interest in expanding that. But we wanted to change the way we do it. We wanted to do something that express a value. One of our deeply held values is that communities are part of sanctuaries. When we go into an area, we want to work with communities. Fundamentally, we want to know that there's an interest in partnering with NOAA to do this. I mean, I'll be quite honest that some of our sanctuary designations have been contentious for some of the reasons that you would expect. Concern about the federal government coming in, concern about restrictions on access. So now we have a track record of what we do in sanctuaries, and we're putting this at the community level to say, if you're interested in the possibility of a sanctuary, this is your opportunity to submit a nomination. So, I mean that in a broad sense. It can be, the city of Ashland, it can be a county, it can be the state, it can be a group of researchers who are interested for whatever reason. And they submit a nomination to NOAA that addresses, there are actually 11 different elements, but I put that in 4 bullets. The first thing is it's a national marine sanctuary, so we need to demonstrate that there are resources of national significance. The second item is demonstrating broad-based support. Now this doesn't mean that there has to be unanimous support. It means that we need to have an understanding that there's enough interest in partnering with NOAA that we should consider having a sanctuary there. We're also looking for possible commitments for partnership opportunities and opportunities for research and education. I think when we designated sanctuaries in the 90s, we tended to look at them as NOAA's coming in with the federal budget and we will do all these programs. But I think most of us know that really the way work gets done the best is with partners, and that really is how we're embracing this new approach, is that we can't do it alone, we don't think anybody can do it alone, and then there's real value in partnerships. So this is the road to nomination, and you are on step 1. See all those people there? Let's have them sitting in a theater here. Really what this means is, it's the community building a nomination. And it does take time. It requires, getting people knowledgeable about what national marine sanctuaries are. It means establishing a vision for what you think a sanctuary could do for a specific area. And I give the committee really kudos for coming up with those goals that were projected at the beginning here, because that really, really helps as they're developing a nomination. So working on the nomination, you'll be working with me. I don't write the nomination for you, but I do try to work as close as I can and provide feedback, provide maybe a different way of thinking about it. And ultimately, the nominator, and I don't think it's been determined yet in this area who the nominator would be, submits it to NOAA. It's not a treatise, it's a document that cannot exceed 25 pages and no appendices except for the letters of support. And we have a couple opportunities to look at it. First, we look to see if there's enough information, and eventually we get to 5 and 6. So the end of this road to nomination, is whether or not NOAA accepts it to our inventory. And the inventory it's a list, I guess, of places that we will consider as national marine sanctuaries, not necessarily. So in getting to steps 5 and 6, we have declined a couple nominations. And this is all, it's a very transparent process. So it's on our website, nominate.noaa.gov, which gives the reasons for why we've declined nominations. It's really either there's not enough information or they haven't demonstrated enough support for it. So these are my key talking points about the two-phase process. So if the nomination is accepted to the inventory, it doesn't mean that it's a designated sanctuary, and it doesn't mean that we'll necessarily take that next step to start a sanctuary designation. We'll look and see what nominations we've accepted. Since this is a new process for us, we don't know how many we'll get. We don't know what resources we'll have to be able to move forward. I mean, with 14 sites in the system, I think it's fair to say that we're not going to be doing 14 more sanctuary designations, in the next 5 years. So that part of it is a little uncertain. When we do start a sanctuary designation, we go through the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, where it becomes a NOAA action. We write a draft environmental impact statement, we write a management plan, and then we publish that for public comment, and then eventually we do a final. That takes a couple years, and there's an incredible amount of community engagement in that. We go way beyond what's required by law in the NEPA process. Your friends over there in Lake Michigan submitted a nomination last fall. We accepted it, I think, in January of this year. They're proposing a 875 square mile area from Port Washington to Two Rivers, and their nomination is focused exclusively on shipwrecks, much like the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. We have decided to move forward with 2 areas, one in Maryland and this one in Wisconsin, Lake Michigan waters. So my last couple slides, I just, kind of getting back to the community perspective, just wanted to reflect on what the sanctuary means in Alpena. And some of these can be extrapolated to other sanctuaries, but there's definitely national recognition. I mean, it's part of an exclusive club. When you look at that map, some of the most spectacular ocean, Great Lakes, coastal places in our country are national marine sanctuaries. So a national recognition, attraction as a destination. We have made investments in the community, whether it's direct NOAA investment or through grant dollars. I think we found that being a national marine sanctuary gets you maybe some bonus points in grant applications. We've invested in a maritime heritage trail, research collection. We placed a hyperbaric chamber at the hospital. which fortunately has not been used very much for diver decompression, but has been used for wound care.